Okay, so welcome to another deep dive.
Right.
Today, we are diving into, a really fascinating collection of material.
Yeah.
Leaked documents, information, specifically focusing on Nepal. We've got WikiLeaks, the Panama Papers,
Yeah.
and other significant disclosures.
Right. A lot of stuff.
Our mission here is, pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah.
To extract the key insights from this stack of sources,
Right.
so that you, the listener, can kind of get a shortcut to understanding the hidden dynamics of power and influence.
Right. The real story.
The real story, what's going on in Nepal.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking at a whole bunch of things, right? From leaked to diplomatic cables,
Yeah.
financial records, investigative journalism reports.
Oh, yeah.
All sorts of interesting bits and pieces.
Right. Digging deep.
So let's unpack this.
All right.
I mean, the first area that really jumped out at me was the American embassy's, what we've been calling leader control, as detailed in the WikiLeaks cables from 2006 to 2010.
Yeah. That's a fascinating period.
It is.
Yeah.
What exactly did these reveal about U.S. strategy?
Well, what's really interesting is that these cables, they actually go into quite a lot of detail about the strategies the U.S. Embassy in Kathmandu was using to influence these key Nepali political figures.
Right.
They basically lay bare the methods, they were using to try and steer Nepali politics in a direction that would benefit them.
Right. In a way that's favorable to them.
Favorable to U.S. interests.
And we even have a specific instance highlighted in the documents.
No, absolutely.
The pressure on the Maoist leader Pushpa Kamal Dahal, also known as Prachanda, back in 2007.
Exactly. So there's this one cable from 2007, and it's fascinating.
Okay.
It reportedly outlines the intense pressure they were putting on Prachanda to become more, moderate. It wasn't just, diplomatic talk. They were offering U.S. support.
Okay.
Even security guarantees.
Security guarantees. That sounds pretty serious.
Yeah.
Trying to bring him into their sphere of influence.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the bigger picture geopolitically, that's exactly what they were doing. They saw the rise of the Maoists as a potential challenge.
Right.
And they wanted to get them aligned with their own objectives.
Interesting.
Okay, South Asia, yeah.
Okay. And then here's where it gets even more interesting, I think.
Okay.
There's this whole other layer that emerges from the leaks.
Okay.
The revelation of these regular, off-the-record meetings.
Yeah.
What was the purpose behind these meetings?
So what's really interesting here is that these meetings were happening between the U.S. Embassy and leaders from the Nepali Congress and the UML.
Okay.
Big names, right? Oli, Deba.
Yeah, very influential.
And it's clear from the discussions that they wanted to get them to cooperate.
To cooperate with them.
Yeah, to counter what they saw as China's growing influence in Nepal.
Oh, I see.
It's not just about the Maoists. It's about managing China's role.
Wow, so a much broader strategy.
Yeah, a much broader strategy.
Okay, so they're leveraging Nepal's peace process, which you would think is a domestic issue.
Right.
As part of a bigger play against China.
Exactly. They're using it for their own purposes.
That's pretty strategic.
Yeah, it is.
And what about the Nepali leaders themselves? I mean, were they just going along with this?
It's hard to say for sure, but the leaks suggest they were aware.
Aware of what was happening?
Of the U.S. intentions, yeah.
Okay.
But they were probably motivated by, the money, the support.
Oh, okay, so a transactional relationship.
It seems that way, yeah.
Even if it wasn't explicitly said.
Yeah.
And what was the U.S. ultimately hoping to get out of all this?
Well, they wanted to integrate Nepal more firmly into their South Asia policy.
Okay.
Align their interests with Washington's wider objectives.
Interesting. Now, the leaks also shed light on India's involvement.
Yes.
In Nepali politics.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, electoral interference.
Right.
As suggested by WikiLeaks and even supported by some local reports.
Yes, there's a lot there.
So tell me about this.
So what's interesting here is it seems India has a history of trying to shape Nepal's political landscape.
Okay.
There's a WikiLeaks cable from 2008, and it mentions Rakesh Sood.
Cook.
He was the Indian ambassador to Nepal at the time.
Right.
And he had this plan to influence the elections for Nepal's constituent assembly.
Okay, influence.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about like diplomatic preferences, right?
No, it went further than that.
Like they were offering tangible support.
Both WikiLeaks and some local discussions in Kathmandu point towards this cooperation. With candidates from the Nepali Congress and the UML.
Okay, I see.
And it wasn't just endorsements. They were providing financial resources, logistical support.
So, direct intervention.
Yeah, pretty much.
And what about these local reports that you mentioned?
So there were a lot of discussions, especially around the 2074 elections.
Okay.
Allegations that India spent a lot of money
to
make sure the leaders they wanted won.
Wow.
It's hard to prove definitively, but the rumors were everywhere.
Wow. So India actively engaging in internal Nepali affairs.
Yeah, if you look at it, it's like they were micromanaging Nepal's politics.
Micromanaging, strong word.
The leaks even mentioned these top Nepali leaders making trips to Delhi.
Okay.
And it said they were going there to receive orders.
Wow.
So yeah, it suggests a pretty high level of dependence.
It does, yeah. And what was India getting out of all this?
Well, it looks like they wanted Nepal to be a pliable neighbor, a state that would follow their lead.
I see, that makes sense.
Aligned with their interests.
Right. Now, let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
There's another intriguing piece of this puzzle. That's the connections between the Maoists and China. And again, this is something revealed by a 2009 WikiLeaks cable.
Yes, very interesting.
So what did this cable reveal?
Well, it shows secret meetings happening between Maoist leaders and Chinese officials.
Okay.
And the cable actually details the requests the Maoists were making.
Requests for what?
For support, including weapons and financial assistance.
Wow.
Pretty significant.
So this is like a whole side of the Maui story that people didn't know about.
Especially after the peace agreement, yeah.
Exactly.
It seems that during the later stages of the People's War, around 2006, 2007, the Maoists started reaching out to China.
Oh, interesting.
As a way to counter India's influence.
Okay, I see.
But they kept this pretty quiet after the peace agreement.
So foreign involvement wasn't just the U.S. and India.
No, China was in the game too.
Interesting.
And it raises questions about the Maoist revolution.
Right.
Were they really just using Nepal?
As a proxy against India.
Wow. And Prachanda, he never really admitted to any of this.
Publicly, no. But the WikiLeaks cables tell a different story.
And what did China stand to gain from all of this?
Well, it seems like they wanted to destabilize Nepal.
Okay.
To weaken India.
I see.
And to create opportunities for themselves.
Now, what about KP Sharma Oli?
Oh, yeah.
And his so-called China card strategy.
Right.
And how that apparently caused a lot of problems with India.
Yes, that was a tense time.
So what happened there?
Well, Oli was basically trying to use China to counter India's dominance.
Okay.
And while the WikiLeaks cables don't directly talk about the China card during his first term, local journalists and other leaks show that China offered Nepal fuel.
Oh, wow.
Secretly during India's blockade.
During the blockade, okay.
Yeah, so that was a big change.
Huge change.
From relying on India.
And then there were the rumors about this rail agreement.
Yeah, that was interesting. Supposedly discussed during Oli's 2018 visit to China.
Right, but no one ever saw the actual document.
So it was a way to provoke India.
Yeah, it was more about the signal than the agreement itself.
Okay, so he's trying to play this China card.
Yeah, to relieve the pressure from India.
But it didn't really work, did it?
Not in the long run.
And there were even reports that India supported Duba's efforts to remove Oli.
Right, they weren't happy.
So Oli, he was trying to stay in power.
Yeah, that was his main goal.
And China, they were trying to increase their influence.
Right, they saw an opportunity.
Okay. And then we have the MCC.
Ah!
The MCC.
The Millennium Challenge Corporation.
Yeah, a lot of debate about that.
A lot of debate. And this alleged secret clause.
Right.
Based on local leaks and analysis?
Yeah, it was a big story.
So what's the story here?
Well, there were all these discussions in the media and on social media about this hidden clause.
Hidden clause.
In the MCC agreement.
Okay.
It was signed in 2023.
Right.
Now, we don't see this specific clause in the WikiLeaks cables.
Right.
But there is a cable from 2010 that hints at the U.S. Embassy being really interested in Nepal's security.
So even if WikiLeaks doesn't confirm it, we know the U.S. has these security interests in Nepal.
They definitely do.
Yeah.
And the hidden aspect is what's fueling the suspicion.
Suspicion about what?
That the U.S. wants to bring the Nepali army into its Indo-Pacific strategy.
Which is all about countering China.
Exactly. Now, The government denies it.
Right.
But the pressure surrounding the MCC,
Right.
it raises a lot of questions.
It does, yeah.
About what the U.S. is really after.
So it's not just about economic development.
No, some people think it's about turning Nepal into a military post.
Wow, a military post.
Part of their strategy against China.
So from the U.S. perspective,
Yeah.
this would be a way to enhance their power.
And their influence.
In the region.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's talk about the Panama Papers.
And these revelations about Nepali leaders' foreign assets back in 2016.
Yeah, that was a big one.
So what did those papers show?
They revealed offshore accounts held by a lot of Nepali individuals.
Okay.
Including businessmen with close ties to political parties.
Oh, I see.
The major leaders weren't named directly.
Right.
But the presence of their associates is pretty telling.
So who are we talking about here?
Well, for example, Ajay Raj Sumarji.
Okay.
He's a businessman with strong links to the Maoist party.
Right.
He had offshore companies in places like the British Virgin Islands.
Okay, so tax havens.
Classic tax havens, yeah.
And where did all this money come from?
That's the big question.
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or billion-dollar question, maybe.
There's speculation that it came from foreign aid,
Okay.
commissions from government contracts.
So public funds being siphoned off.
It's possible.
That's a pretty serious allegation.
It is.
So Nepali leaders potentially sending money abroad,
Yeah.
hiding it.
To protect themselves.
And who benefits from this?
The leaders and their families, of course.
Okay, so we've got all this information. What's the overall picture that's emerging here?
It's a picture of Nepal as a strategic playing field.
Strategic playing field, wow.
Where the U.S., India, and China are all maneuvering.
Right.
And they're using Nepali leaders to get what they want.
Okay.
The leaks suggest that Nepali leaders are often not really independent.
Not calling the shots?
Yeah, they're more like puppets.
Puppets, okay.
Following someone else's script.
And this isn't just a few random events.
No, it's a pattern.
A pattern.
It doesn't matter who's in power.
Right.
Oli, Dahal, Dilwar.
They're all influenced.
By outside forces.
And the public is just kind of left in the dark.
Yeah, they're fed stories about elections and development.
Right.
But the real power dynamics are hidden.
And what's the danger of this?
Nepal could lose its independence.
Wow.
Become a pawn in a bigger game.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that there were even more details in the WikiLeaks and Panama Papers.
Oh, yeah, we just scratched the surface.
Let's dive into those.
All right.
So what else is in there?
If we go back to the WikiLeaks cables from the peace process between 2006 and 2010, we see even more examples of foreign influence.
All right.
For instance, there's a 2007 cable from Ambassador Moriarty.
Okay.
And he talks about bringing Prachanda under our control.
Under our control.
Yeah, and they were offering aid and security guarantees as leverage.
Wow, so they were really actively pursuing this.
They were, and in 2006, the Indian Foreign Secretary, Shyam Saran, he put a lot of pressure on Nepal.
For what?
To make sure the peace agreement would secure our interests.
Our interests, so India's interests.
Exactly. And by 2008, the U.S. was really focused on the Maoists' weapons.
Okay.
They wanted to control them.
I see.
And there are even hints that they had an agreement with India.
To do what?
To stop giving military aid to the Maoists.
Wow.
It was a coordinated effort.
So the peace process wasn't just about peace in Nepal.
No, it was also about India and the U.S. containing China.
And the Nepali leaders were probably aware of this.
It seems likely.
But they went along with it because of the foreign support.
Yeah, they saw it as beneficial.
So the U.S. and India, they got a more stable Nepal.
And a strategic buffer.
A strategic buffer.
Against China.
Now, let's look at the constitution-making process.
Okay.
And how that was influenced by foreign powers.
Right, there's a lot to unpack there.
So tell me about that.
Well, the WikiLeaks cables from 2009-10, and even some stuff around the 2015 Constitution show a lot of pressure from outside.
Okay.
For example, there's this U.S. Embassy cable from 2010, and they say that federalism will weaken Nepal and increase our influence.
Increase our influence. Wow.
Saw it as a way to get more control.
And India was using the Madheshi issues.
Yeah, to push their own agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there was the blockade in 2015.
After the Constitution was finalized.
That wasn't directly in WikiLeaks.
Not directly, but it fits the pattern.
Right.
There are hints in earlier cables that they were thinking about doing this.
So the Constitution It might have been influenced by foreign powers.
To serve their interests.
And the Nepali leaders went along with it.
And presented it as their victory.
But the real benefit went to India and the U.S.
They got a weaker Nepal.
Okay, let's go back to the Panama Papers for a minute.
Okay.
And talk more about the specifics of this offshore wealth.
All right.
So what else is in there?
Well, the 2016 leak gave more details about these offshore activities.
Okay.
And while the big leaders weren't named, their associates were.
Okay, right.
And that tells us a lot.
So, for example?
Ajaya Rajsumarji.
Okay.
His company's in the British Virgin Islands.
Okay.
It raises questions about where his wealth came from.
Right.
And there were reports about foreign accounts held by relatives of leaders.
Oh, wow.
From both the Nepali Congress and the UML.
Okay.
Properties in Dubai, Singapore.
Wow.
And then in 2018, there was this case of a minister's son.
Okay.
Found with property in Australia.
Okay.
No one could explain where it came from.
And people connected that back to the Panama Papers.
Yeah, a lot of people thought there was a link.
So it's like Nepali leaders are taking money out of the country
and hiding it overseas
to protect their own future
at the expense of the public.
Now let's talk about some other leaks that have affected Nepal.
Okay.
There's this gold smuggling case from 2018.
Yeah, that was a big one. Initially, it was 33 kilograms of gold.
Wow.
But then it turned out to be 61.
61 kilograms of gold. That's incredible.
It was huge. And it involved some pretty big names.
From which parties?
Both the Maoists and the Nepali Congress.
Okay.
But even though the case was investigated, no one really high up was convicted.
And this wasn't just a local operation?
No, the gold came from Dubai.
Dubai, okay.
Nepal was a transit point.
A transit point for international smuggling.
Exactly. And you have to wonder, how could this happen on such a large scale?
Without some help.
Without someone protecting them.
Political protection.
It seems likely.
And the benefit, of course, is the money.
A lot of money.
For the smugglers.
Yeah.
And for whoever's protecting them.
Exactly.
And then there was the wide-body aircraft purchase.
Yeah, another big scandal.
So what happened there?
A parliamentary committee found irregularities in the purchase of 2 wide-body aircraft.
By Nepal Airlines?
Yeah, Nepal Airlines Corporation.
Okay.
It was over 4 billion rupees.
Wow.
A lot of money.
And who was involved?
Well, the allegations were against the tourism minister.
Okay.
And some officials from Oli's government.
Okay.
And there were rumors about these commission deals.
Secret deals.
With the company that sold the aircraft.
Okay.
And people thought this money might have gone to foreign accounts.
Like the ones in the Panama Papers.
It's possible.
So another example of corruption.
Yeah, the connection between corporations and politicians.
And the benefit goes to the leaders.
And their friends.
And the foreign companies.
Right.
And even going back before all these major leaks, we see this pattern of foreign influence.
It's a recurring theme.
Like with King Gyanendra.
Right.
WikiLeaks shows that the U.S. and India supported him.
When he took power in 2005...
And why would they do that?
Well, the U.S. thought he would crack down on the Maoists.
Okay, so aligning with their interests?
Exactly.
Even though it wasn't exactly democratic?
Yeah, they didn't seem to mind that.
And India.
They were hoping to use him as a balancer against the Maoists.
Okay.
But then they changed their strategy and supported the people's movement.
So even the king's actions were influenced by foreign powers?
It seems that way, yeah.
The U.S. and India were trying to weaken the Maoists.
And later on, they got to look like the good guys.
By supporting the movement.
Yeah, clever strategy.
So we're seeing a lot of consistency here.
Yeah, across different sectors, different time periods.
In politics, foreign influence is shaping decisions.
The peace process, the Constitution, elections.
WikiLeaks shows that clearly.
In business, we see these cases of corruption.
Like the gold smuggling, the aircraft purchase.
Leaders working with foreigners to exploit Nepal.
And the Panama Papers show that leaders are hiding their wealth abroad.
While the public suffers.
So Nepal is not just a playing field.
It's also a market for exploitation.
With leaders and foreigners working together.
To enrich themselves.
And what about the royal family?
Yeah, even though they're not in power anymore.
They still seem to be involved.
The WikiLeaks cables from 2005.
Okay.
They show the U.S. Embassy thought Gyanendra would be tough on the Maoists.
Okay.
Which is what they wanted.
So he was useful to them.
Yeah, he served their interests.
Even though it meant undermining democracy.
And India, they initially saw him as a way to balance the Maoists, but then they switched sides and supported the movement.
So Gyanendra wasn't acting alone?
No, he was influenced by foreign powers.
And they benefited from it.
Initially by weakening the Maoists.
And then by becoming heroes.
When the monarchy ended.
Now, what about the royal family's relationship with India?
There's a cable from 2004.
Okay.
It mentions a close relationship between the Indian ambassador and Gyanendra.
Okay.
And India supported him.
Why?
For stability in Nepal.
Stability.
And there were reports of Gyanendra meeting with Indian leaders.
Secretly.
Quietly.
And by 2005, India saw him as a way to counter the Maoists.
Right.
So a lot of influence even within the palace.
It seems so.
And then there's the palace massacre.
A very dark chapter.
A very dark chapter.
WikiLeaks hints that India might have wanted more control over Gyanendra.
After he became king.
Yeah, and they benefited from the instability.
From the instability. Okay.
Yeah.
What about the Panama Papers?
The Panama Papers show offshore accounts linked to Gyanendra's associates.
So people close to him.
Yeah, palace officials, businessmen,
Okay.
companies in Switzerland of British Virgin Islands.
So tax havens again.
Yeah, classic tax havens.
And
It was probably accumulated during royal rule.
right.
Contracts, land deals,
And they moved it offshore after the monarchy ended.
to protect it.
And there were reports in the Indian media
In 2010,
that Gyanendra's family had property in India.
unexplained wealth.
So they were misusing their power to get rich
It seems that way.
and hiding their money
For
abroad.
their own benefit.
And the 2001 Palace Massacre,
That's still a mystery.
a mystery.
We don't have any hard proof of foreign involvement in the WikiLeaks cables,
Okay.
but it's something people have talked about a lot.
Especially in Nepal.
Yeah, local media, public discussions.
People have their suspicions.
They do, because King Birendra was seen as more independent.
Okay.
And some people think that's why he was targeted.
Yep.
But the official investigation blamed Dipendra.
But there is still a lot of unanswered questions. Like where the weapons came from.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's possible that Gyanendra coming to power
Benefited India and the U.S.
because they wanted Nepal to be destabilized.
Yeah, and they could exert more influence.
And the royal family also had business interests.
Oh, yeah, a whole business empire.
Hotels, banks, contracts.
You named it.
And they built this up during their rule.
With the help of foreign partners.
And even though the monarchy ended,
They still hold on to these assets.
so they benefited from their position.
And their connections.
And after the monarchy was abolished,
There were reports of them trying to come back.
really,
Gyanendra and his supporters, they had these plans
secret plans.
to restore the monarchy.
Wow.
They were linked to the RPP.
Okay.
And there were meetings
Okay.
to gather support for Gyanendra.
And they even had some support from India.
Yeah, from the BJP. Connected to the Hindu Rashtra,